Islam in Portugal, population declining but culture survives. Islam in Portugal leaves behind a cultural legacy such as language. The presence of Islam in Portugal several centuries ago still leaves behind an intellectual and cultural legacy. Many things show that Arabic influence can still be found in the Portuguese language. For example, the expression oxala, which is pronounced oshalla. This expression comes from the sentence insya Allah, or when pronounced separately becomes insya Allah. It is not surprising, because for centuries the area that is now Portugal has been ruled by Arabic-speaking Muslims known as the Moors. In the 8th century, Muslims from North Africa sailed to Europe and conquered the area that is now Portugal and Spain. The area was known as Andalusia. Andalusia flourished and prospered under the auspices of the Umayyad Empire. Although today, the historical legacy of Andalusia's prosperity under Islamic rule has been largely forgotten in a country that is currently predominantly Catholic. As is the case in schools in Portugal, the long history of Muslim rule of around 5 centuries is only studied briefly. Today, most textbooks emphasize the history of the victorious reconquest by Christian rulers assisted by the Crusaders, which ended in the 13th century. Portuguese identity was also built to oppose the Moors. Historically, the Moors were depicted as enemies. Although not everyone agrees with this version of history. According to University of Évora historian Professor Filomena Barros, in the 10th century half the population of the Iberian Peninsula was Muslim. For Barros, the arrival of Muslims from North Africa and the armies of the Christian kingdoms of Northern Europe to conquer the region was equally foreign. The majority of the population converted to Islam. The Iberian Peninsula was conquered. It is interesting when we do not talk about the Roman conquest or the Visigothic conquest, but we talk about the Islamic conquest, Barros said as reported by Al Jazeera on. Barros explained that before Muslims arrived, the region was ruled by the Visigoths, a Germanic people who ruled between 418 and 711. Barros explained that history books often focus on the battles between Christian rulers and Muslims. However, the defeat of the Muslim army did not mean the end of the presence and influence of Muslims in Portugal. The reconquest by Christians did not mean that Muslims returned to their land, because this land was also theirs, he said. Today, of the country's 11 million population, Muslims make up less than 0.5%. But it is important to realize that the Muslim population in the region was once much larger. What is taught in schools is always taught from the perspective of the victor, said Norine Sackler, a member of the Muslim community in Lisbon, Portugal. Sackler was born in Portugal. Her parents are of Indian and Arab descent. She wants the curriculum in Portugal to be better, namely by covering the long period of Muslim, Christian and Jewish existence which is believed to be the reason why the region flourished as a center of culture and science. I wish there was more focus on the legacy left by the Muslim rulers, because that is not very popular in Portugal, she said. Islam in Portugal has a long and varied history. Here are some key points about Islam in Portugal. Early history. Islam first arrived in the Iberian Peninsula in the 8th century, when Muslim forces from the Umayyad Caliphate conquered what is now Spain and Portugal. For nearly 500 years, the region was known as Al-Andalus and was an important cultural and intellectual center of the Islamic world. Reconquista and persecution. In the late 15th century, the Reconquista, a Christian effort to reclaim the Iberian Peninsula from Muslim rule, culminated in the conquest of Granada in 1492. During this period, Muslims living in the region were faced with the choice of emigrating, converting to Christianity, or facing persecution. Cultural influence. Although Islam was politically driven out of the Iberian Peninsula, its cultural and intellectual influence remained. The architecture, science, and language of the region still bear traces of Islam, such as the use of Arabic words in Portuguese and the Moorish architectural style. Contemporary Muslim community. In recent decades, Portugal has become home to a more diverse Muslim community. Immigration from countries such as Morocco, Pakistan, and the Middle East has introduced Islam to the wider Portuguese society. The Muslim community in Portugal now numbers several thousand people and has active mosques and organizations. Religious rights and freedom. Portugal is a secular state with a constitution that guarantees freedom of religion. This means that Muslims in Portugal can practice their religion relatively freely. Although the Muslim community is small, they are able to practice their religion and celebrate Islamic holidays. Interfaith dialogue. In Portugal, there are efforts to promote interfaith dialogue and cross-cultural understanding. Several initiatives focus on cooperation between different religious groups to build tolerance and mutual understanding. Overall, although the history of Islam in Portugal has involved periods of oppression and change, the Muslim community today plays a significant role in the country's cultural and social diversity.